The New Patriotic Party is preparing to choose a candidate to help it break the 8. The question has always been, is it the horse or the jockey? Who is going to lead the party to break the 8? Is it the party itself, based on its record, that would lead to the breaking of the 8, or it needs a good driver in the seat? The job to be the driver of the seat of the party has started. At least 10 people are already on the field looking to be the flag bearer to replace Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo for the New Patriotic Party's top job. On Face to Face today, we are focusing on one of the candidates. When we return, I'll tell you who that is. My name is Umaru Sandamadu, and you're welcome to Face to Face. My guest has done a lot of work in government and in party, but for now his preoccupation is ensuring that Alan Kwadwo Kyerematen becomes flag bearer of the New Patriotic Party. His name is Nana Ohene Ntow. He was a general secretary of the party and also a former government official. You're welcome to Face to Face.
Thank you, Umar.
How are you?
God's grace, I'm doing very well.
I didn't add that you're a former broadcaster too.
Yeah.
Do you miss it?
Of course, broadcasting and television for me was such that it just couldn't get out of your blood. But it gets to a point where I guess you got to move on. Yeah.
Do you not think
any day, any time the opportunity presents itself for me to do anything broadcasting, I guess I'm going to jump at it.
Maybe you should get a show and then just relieve the moment,
Yeah.
TV show or radio
I would
show.
definitely agree with
Yeah.
that. I would have to look for the opportunity, maybe start putting my own thoughts together. I have just too many things running through my head, I'm sure I can crystallize some shows around one or two of them.
You have been missing in action, haven't you? What have you been up to? We've not seen much of you for a while now.
Well, if you say missing, I guess missing in the public media.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't mean I'm missing in action.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, basically, I'm in retirement. I left office as the General Secretary in 2010. And I've had to see to a few little private things to keep body and soul together. But I've also spent quite a bit of that time doing church work, doing gospel work.
Okay.
It's really the focus of my real life, Honestly speaking, everything else, even politics, is secondary.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
You run a church or?
I don't run a church. I am one of the key members, the leading members of a small Pentecostal charismatic church in Ajuriano, Calvary Worship Center.
Okay.
Yeah, and I happen to be the director for prayer.
I see.
So
you're a prayer warrior extraordinaire.
Well, it's just the thing, when you study the life of Christ and you just study what he teaches his disciples to do in terms of presenting the gospel, the message of salvation. There are two key things that the apostles teach about that work: teaching the word of God and prayer.
Okay.
These are the two key things, and I do both. The way I see it, you can't even do effective prayer if you don't understand the Bible well enough.
Okay.
So you go to study, and then that will now provide you with a platform or the foundation to do effective prayer. Okay. Of course, with the help of the Spirit of God.
Politician, becoming a religious person or a church person, people have a perception about politics and politicians.
Yes.
How did you win yourself out of politics to become a church person? I know the President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo gave a lecture in the US where he talked about navigating between being a politician and also being a religious person or a church person. How do you navigate that? How do you do the two? How do you do politics and do religion and church when people think that politics is dirty?
Actually, I didn't expect this
No,
discussion to come up.
I know, this is just something I just thought of, yeah.
No, but the thing is also that since I was a child, I was born into the Presbyterian Church in Latte.
Okay.
My grandmother brought me up basically, and growing up as children, we were very religious, I should put it.
Okay.
Home, a Christian religious home. I went to the Presby Primary School and then the Presby Middle Boarding School, which was all very typically Presbyterian.
Okay.
But going on to secondary school, I got into the SU stuff. So I should say that it has always been there.
So even the religion came before the politics.
Precisely.
I see. So you have a good foundation.
Yes. So the foundation has always been there.
I see.
And then politics.
Very well. Do you miss being general secretary?
That's an interesting question. I don't want to become general secretary again. So to that extent, you might say I don't miss it.
Okay.
But I am very interested in how the party is run.
Administration.
Especially, yes, how the general secretary does his work. Because I would say that when I was campaigning to become general secretary, I had a certain manifesto. I had a certain 11-point manifesto. I don't remember all the details now.
Yeah.
But I thought I was going to be able to achieve a lot of them. But somehow I was able to achieve basically two, which is to set up a communications department for the party and to set up an IT department for the party.
Okay.
These two I managed to do. So I am quite satisfied with that. And of course, since I have been very party-minded, because my slogan when I was campaigning was no party, no government. My sense was that
so the party is a base.
Build a strong party, then you have a chance of winning an election. A strong party would mean not just the party structures, but what the party stands for in terms of its message to the people, in terms of its manifesto and policy programs, should the party become government. Those were the things that I was very passionate about.
And you were part of the early people who had to build a party after taking over from the NDC government under John Kufuor. I mean, that would have been a lot of work. NDC had a lot of structures in place. I mean, the revolution eventually became a political party, if you like, which became the NDC. It was easy for them to tap into their existing branches. You guys had to build the NPP from scratch, having returned to democracy, and having one office now, you had to manage between being a government and also a political party. Would you say that the NPP has fully grown and reached a certain stage where it is an unbreakable party? Because in 2004, one of the problems NDC faced was, they said there's going to be a crack in the NDC. Obeda Samoa was leaving with Francis Esem and all those people. Rawlings was there. Now Rawlings is no more there. Do parties need a central figure around which it will evolve, or you think parties should run an administration where they can evolve and grow on their own? What is the state of the NPP based on your own?
You've asked so many questions in one. Now, to start with, let me go to the beginning of your question. Has NPP got the structures to withstand basically the vicissitudes of the life of a political party, and does NPP have the history, and the pedigree? I would dare say that in Ghana, if you take the history and the antecedents of NPP into account, NPP is the party that probably has the strongest history and tradition in political party formation and organization than any other party.
Even though there were disruptions on the way?
There were disruptions, but you would find that every now and then when the government, the nation will return to democratic multi-party rule, you tend to fall back on your own experiences, on your own history and traditions and so on. To that extent, I would say even NDC never had the benefit of having to grow from scratch as a people-oriented, community-oriented, society-oriented political party with certain clearly identifiable philosophies and traditions. I mean, NDC really was a contraption that emerged out of a military government. And I would say this from time to time, that NDC is the party that had the benefit of state resources in the formation of a political party. You know, that would have been a certain advantage that history, if you like, gave them. An unfair advantage, though, but that's what happened. So indeed, if you want to talk about a political party that would have really solid roots and so would have the strength and the tenacity to move into the future, I think it is the New Patriotic Party. Otherwise, some of the things that have happened to the party
would have destabilized.
It would have finished the party completely.
Okay.
Some of the developments that came along would have finished the party by now.
Since '92, there's almost like an unwritten rule now that each party serves for 8 years and goes.
Yes.
Your party now wants to break the 8. Is it the party that can break the 8 or the government? How do you see it from where you stand?
Your questions tend to be quite interesting. Now, you see, you're talking about the party and the government. But I will add a third factor, the individual leader.
Good. I deliberately left that out. If you notice in my intro, I mentioned the jockey.
I'll deal
because
with
I want us to deal with the individual after we graduate with the party.
Yes. Before a party gets elected, for example, in the case of the NPP by 2000, the party hadn't become government before. So the party couldn't have delivered 1 kilometer of a road or 1 hospital or 1 school block or a kilowatt of electricity or nothing. All that the party had was a message that vote for us as a political party. We represent ABC ideals and values. We are the people who would allow you to develop your own talents and your own potential in a free and democratic and law-abiding environment. We are the political tradition that would allow people to express themselves and be themselves. And we are the kind of political party that will not trample upon human rights and will respect people's property rights and so on and so forth. So you sell these kinds of ideas and ideals, and then people buy them and they vote for you. So to that extent, a party is able to sell itself, and you succeed in getting the electorate to vote for you, and you become government. Now, when you become government, it's another story now. You sold out a manifesto, you sold out a message, the people bought it, they gave you the mandate. Now, what do you do with it? So, at the end of a term, the people rate you and say, yes, we would allow you to go back for a second term of 4 years. In both instances, in the case of President Kufuor leading NPP 2001 to 2008, NPP was in power. And then again, 2016 and now on to 2024, NPP has been in power. So to that extent, I would say yes, the party succeeded in selling itself, selling its message, selling its manifesto and policies, and then plus, having done a first term, now people can see your deliverables and say, oh yeah, now we're comfortable, would allow you to go again.
I see. So
but somehow, once President Kufuor's first term ended 8 years, the electorate decided that no, we want another party to come in. So to that extent, the party could not perpetuate itself.
So the party suffered the government's actions and inactions.
Well, see, sometimes it's very difficult to judge the behavior of voters. Because you see, when governments perform, sometimes, it does not necessarily guarantee an extension of your mandate.
That's true.
Yeah, I remember.
There are a lot of things that are...
Oh, yeah. I remember this very fact. I don't remember the exact dates, but in Britain, for example, it was after Sir Winston Churchill had won the Second World War that he lost an election. And then later on,
who would have thought?
You know, and everybody hailed him as a hero. He went to the election and lost. You know, so sometimes it's quite tricky, and you require a bit of critical analysis.
As someone who has been administrator of a party, you would agree that campaigning from opposition is easier than campaigning from government.
I would concede.
So when your party now in government says it will break the 8, you are playing defense And defense is more difficult than attack.
Yes.
NDC has got his job cut out for it. Yes. The media is doing the campaign against government and is not necessarily doing it for the NDC. So NDC essentially just have to ride on the waves. You did that in 2016, you won. In 2012, you did a good job. By 2016, you won. 2000, you did the same. Do you think that your party has truly delivered? And I want you to talk on economics now, the state of affairs, to deserve a second chance, not a second, a third chance in a period of 12 years?
You know, the dynamics that you're looking at in the scenarios that you're presenting are quite different. At the time that NDC was exiting its first 8 years with President Rawlings, NPP had never been in power. So the dynamics, some of the dynamics at the time would be people really wanted a change. We may talk about the performance of government on the economic front and on other fronts and factors, but there was this issue of change. And it was a big issue.
It's a big wave.
It was a very strong wave. So that was one. Two, the government, of course, as you said, had its own negatives. And people had seen it. They hadn't seen Kufuor or the NPP in government before. So why don't we try that? Now, coming to the current situation, we have a certain very peculiar dynamic where, yes, NPP would have completed an 8-year term, 2 terms, but NDC will be presenting a candidate who is not so new in terms of John Mahama.
So that's where everything changes.
That's why I'm telling you the dynamics are not exactly the same. So if you want to even address the issue of breaking the 8 or not breaking the 8, there are just several nuanced dynamics that you really need to pay attention to. John Mahama has been vice president before. John Mahama has been president before. So really, to that extent, John Mahama is not new. Now we can talk about the performance of the Kufuor government. The government has introduced some very major social intervention programs since its first term. Intervention programs that I would say has also cost the government a certain amount in terms of resources that have become negative in other areas. Now, when you look at the free SHS program, for example, this is a program that you put in what I would call a sink fund. If you're going to get any returns from education as such,
it takes time.
It's going to be in another 10, 15, 20 years.
It's not immediate.
It's not immediate. And yet this was critical. You needed to do that. The government has invested quite a bit in infrastructure. And then the government has also invested in building up industry, supporting industry. I mean, the very famous One District, One Factory program that has been spearheaded by my good friend and boss, Alacha Martin, and all of that he has done. And the changes that have also happened in some aspects of governance. And I'm talking about here the systems of, say, managing the ports, where systems of digitalization were introduced and other areas. I mean, you can talk about a lot of these things. These were major initiatives that have done quite a lot. The President Kufuor government laid the foundation for the national identification system, for example. The NDC didn't do so much of it, but once NPP came back, it was picked up very strongly. And now we're seeing that this is one of the key things you need to do in order to harness your national resources for deployment and development. So you can judge the government on several different platforms and see what government has done right. Now, when you go to the economy, that's where a lot of people are bashing the current NPP government. They're looking at exchange rate. I mean, they sort of simplified, sometimes oversimplified, but these are real issues. The cost of living and so on and so forth. Everybody is...
And so that's a big defense.
NPP people. Everybody is complaining. So that is a major issue for the government,
for you,
for the party to fight. Exactly.
So I'm going to let you explain to me what your candidate is going to do different. But we have to take a break now. Before the break, though, you mentioned that the social interventions of your party. Under Kufuor, you brought a lot of mass programs.
Yes.
Under Kufuor, I mean, Metro Mass,
free maternal care,
all those things.
school feeding.
For a party that is not supposed to be socialist, you did that. And Akufo-Addo, you're doing a lot of socialist interventions. Is it that your party has changed its, I don't know, is it philosophy? Is that the case?
Not at all. No. Now, I lived in Canada. I studied in Canada for some time. Canada is not a socialist or communist country at all. But if you want to find one country in the world where social systems work best, it's in Canada. And Canada is not a socialist communist country. So I don't think that you can limit social intervention programs by government to socialist communist governments. All human beings everywhere require good education. All human beings everywhere require good health facilities, and so on. And these are things that...
Whether you're capitalist or socialist, you have to build that.
You need the human capital to be able to build physical, financial, and other capital. So any government that is paying attention to these things cannot be classified as communist or socialist at all. This is a government that will be responding to real human needs. And that really, after all, is the responsibility of government.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not every time you get a chief administrator of a political party to interview. So when I had Ohene, I just thought I should walk through the political party systems of Ghana before we talk about the main reason he's with us. He is on the Alan Chamantin campaign. My name is Umaru Sandamadu. This is Face to Face.
The point of view. If cabinet ministers have been accused of sabotaging a major government program, which almost every day was in the news, how come we haven't heard anything until after the interview and then we're told that this should be investigated?
With the complexities of the issues happening around us on a daily basis,
Bernard, we're not in a good place. We're not in a good place because we don't have access to the international capital market.
it's the hard-hitting conversations on The Point of View.
NPP and the NDC have had a consensus about economic policy. The fight really has been about who will be in power and who will be sitting at the edge of the trough and helping themselves and their associates.
And the probing questions of The Point of View.
How many times have I even showed the world's most expensive hole? Why can't they tell us the exact amount? And why is it that what they told Parliament is not less than $1 million?
The twisted entanglements of politics and governance.
There's nothing wrong for a politician to address national issues and also respond to critics.
As well as religious and social discourse.
I think that people are entitled to their own opinion on issues. And so when the president said, I want to build a national cathedral, people can have their own opinion on matters. But let us pray that God will bless this economy so that we can have our roads built and the cathedral built.
The Point of View brings you the policymakers and duty bearers and drills down to the very bottom of issues.
As part of your budget for the year is a line item that says what? Electricity.
Yeah,
So what's your reason for not paying?
the economy.
How can the economy be a reason?
Yeah.
What about us?
The Point of View airs every Monday and Wednesday at 9 p.m. only on City TV and is sponsored by Belpac. Belpac, just perfect.
You're welcome back. This is Face to Face on City TV. My guest is Ohene Ntow. He's former secretary of the New Patriotic Party, but for purpose of this conversation, he's a senior advisor on strategy and operations for the Alan Chamantin campaign for flag bearership. Let's talk about Alan Chamantin now. What is the Alan story for which you've decided to join? And you've always been on that side of things, yes. But for those who do not know, I mean, 2007, he made his bid. It wasn't that successful. He has served under Akufo-Addo as Minister for Trade. He has resigned. He wants the job now as flag bearer. What is his story?
Thank you very much. Alan Chamantin has such an illustrious and interesting story. Not just as a brilliant academic person, but also as a professional person, as a diplomat, as a politician, as a consultant, you know, and as just a likable personality. He's just great. Now, I've been with Alan in a personal relationship before NPP politics. as such.
So how long have you known him for?
No, this is a long time.
How did
In
you
the
first meet? Do you
very
remember?
close, mid-90s, when he was still moving the Empretech Ghana.
We don't know. We don't know. Those of us who are young, we don't
Africa,
know.
yes.
So what was that
Enterprise
about?
Africa, and then Empretech Ghana. He started off with Empretech Ghana. This was a program sponsored by the United Nations for training and developing entrepreneurs and people with enterprise orientations to build them up in terms of their skills, management, finance, and other areas where people can run their own businesses with the requisite professional and technical tips that will make their businesses more profitable, more efficient, and have the capacity to grow. Because the whole idea that brought Alan into this particular program was also that the private sector as such is the one that any government, any society that really wanted to develop economically and otherwise should focus on. So his area, his focus, his passion has been to help the private sector develop. He himself has a degree in economics and a professional lawyer. He has a degree and a professional in law, and he has a postgraduate degree in management studies. And he's been a consultant all over the place. So once Alan got into this program that was sponsored by the UN, Empretech Ghana, it expanded to a larger program that now involved Africa. So it sort of evolved into Enterprise Africa. And with that program alone, Alan has built countless number of entrepreneurs, enterprises, businesses that are multi-billion-dollar businesses in Ghana and in other, especially West African countries, under the auspices of the United Nations. Now, beyond that, Alan comes into government. No, let me even talk about his party involvement before the party comes into government. Mm-hmm. In 1992, the PNDC now opens the floodgates for multi-party, if you like, partisan politics to resume. And that opened up the gates for the Fourth Republic. At that time, Rawlings had decided that because he was forming a party fresh from the oven, we should all get started on a clean sheet. I don't want any party taking on any name from the past. It will give you a certain advantage.
So UP should collapse?
No, I mean, if you don't find a new name, then forget it. So, of course, you would know that NPP as such had come from this historical background. First of all, from the United Gold Coast Convention, UGCC. UGCC dies off, and then into the immediate independence, post-independence period, pre-independence period, United Party gets formed. Eventually, United Party has to phase out with the CPP, Kwame Nkrumah's CPP. Mm-hmm. And then UP lost out then. And then over the period, Nkrumah is ousted in 1966. I was in primary school then. And then so many things happen. And then the Third Republic comes in. The Second Republic comes in, sorry. The Second Republic comes in 1969 with Prime Minister Buzia.
And
the Progress Party. Yes, exactly, with President Akufo-Addo's father as the ceremonial president then.
So that's PP?
Yes, Progress Party. That era, the Second Republic, also gets overthrown in 1972 by Kutu Achampong, and so many intervening military governments, SMC, and all of those things. And then
79.
Jerry Rawlings in 79. And then Rawlings more or less sort of supervises, shepherds Ghana into the Third Republic. Liman takes over. And then Rawlings felt that...
did NPP have a party against Liman?
Of course. PFP.
PFP, okay.
Popular Front
Okay,
Party.
okay. That's Victor
Usu.
Yes, okay.
Yes, PFP. Mm-hmm. Yes. Has his own little story out there. But then...
But that was a short-lived republic.
Yes. Rawlings, who supervised basically the elections, felt that as
he came back for his
head
team.
prefect, the students were not behaving properly. As a senior housemaster, he comes and kicks everybody out and takes over himself for a good 11 years. And then we now evolve into the Fourth Republic, where he now metamorphosed into a civilian president. That was when now NPP comes in. So between 1991 into 92, NPP gets formed. Right from that point, the very cradle of the birth of NPP, Alan Kyerematen was right there.
What did he do?
Alan Kyerematen then was the leader of a group of professional young men and women, which is called the Young Executives Forum. Incidentally, by the time that Rawlings ushered Ghana into the Fourth Republic, the 11-year period of his military rule, unfortunately, I should say, had been targeted at political opponents, which mainly happened to be NPP, PFP, PP elements. You know, so by the time that the Fourth Republic as such is ushered in and multi-party democracy is allowed to begin to grow again, and you know, multi-party democracy requires a lot of resources. You are building your own, basically private organization, nationwide organization, have to have offices, have to have representatives, have to have people rallying around you all across the country. It requires a lot of resources. But by the time the Fourth Republic opened, most of the people who could have any serious material, financial resources to offer had basically been systematically destroyed by Rawlings. And I was in the media then, and I saw it all. I remember Rawlings himself going on television and telling Ghanaians that they shouldn't buy Apino soup. And Apino soup was produced by Apia Menka, one of the leading members of Apia Menka. And his reason was that when Apia Menka got money, he would use it to overthrow a government. So they shouldn't buy it. He went after so many of them. Dr. Safwodu had a drug manufacturing pharmaceutical company in Kwamo, in Kumasi. Rawlings personally drove an armored car into the factory and stopped the workers, stopped the factory. Everything shut down. And that was how Dr. Safwodu just went down until he never rose up again. And a couple of others. So by the time NPP was formed, Professor Dubois became the candidate for the 1992 elections. NPP was so terribly cash-strapped. It was the Young Executive Forum which provided a platform for serious, significant fundraising to support NPP right from day one. And Alan Kyerematen was their chairman.
Okay.
So you can imagine how Alan's political teeth were cut right at the birth of the New Patriotic Party.
So when you talk about people's involvement in parties, and when we talk about Akufo-Addo, for instance, we remember he was in parliament. Usually politicians, you're either running party administration or doing parliament or the executive. He has not done party administration. I don't think Akufo-Addo did that, but he was involved in parliament, the works of the party. He was on the street for Kumi Prekum, so he's remembered for those things. I mean, his father, of course, so for him it's a natural. Yeah. Do we have records of Alan also being involved in the party to that level?
No, if you don't even have an organization financially supported, materially supported, how do you even get onto the streets to campaign or to do some things in the name of the party? Now, what I'm simply saying is that the people who came together to form the party played different roles at different times.
So his role was the business side of things.
This is the role that if this party hadn't got at that time, this party probably wouldn't even be in existence.
There would be no oil in the machine.
Seriously speaking. For example, the first real 4x4 vehicle that Professor Dubois needed to effectively prosecute his campaign was procured by the Young Executives Forum. The first national headquarters of the party in Kokomlemle was procured with a significant sum of money provided by the Young Executive Forum as part of the down payment before other fundraising activities were done to build the funds enough to own a headquarters. Now, that for me is the very foundation. If you don't have a foundation, you don't even talk about a building. And even after that, on any campaign that this party has waged, one of the key figures of any NPP national campaign has been Alan Kyerematen, whether he was the candidate or not.
Okay.
And he hasn't ever been the candidate, whether for Kufuor's campaign or for Akufo-Addo's
So he was on
campaign.
the campaign trail with Kufuor.
He has actively been right there. And these are the young people at the time who provided the bulk of the support that the party so critically needed to become a real political party.
John Kufuor wins the elections, makes him first an ambassador, and then gives him a ministerial position. And incidentally, he has been at trade ministry under Kufuor, trade ministry under. So if we want to look at Ghana's trade story, he must definitely have a huge chunk.
He's number one, really.
John Kufuor started presidential special initiatives, and I remember that vividly. There was one on cassava, I think there was cashew and all of that. You were in government, so you know that better.
Yes.
Alan Kyerematen was the man in charge of that.
Yes.
That special initiative is a collapsed initiative as we speak. Is that not part of the legacies of Alan Kyerematen that he should be taken as a baggage with him?
For me, it is very highly regrettable for anyone to describe those initiatives as collapsed and a baggage that Alan Kyerematen is carrying. But before I come to that, I still want to fill you in a little bit.
No problem.
With the man Alan Kyerematen and his capacities. When Kufuor won the presidency in 2001, he made Alan ambassador to the United States. Now, for about 3 years, almost, Alan was the ambassador. Within that period of being ambassador, that was when Alan initiated discussions between Ghana and the United States and succeeded in getting Ghana to sign a trade preferential arrangement, then known as the AGOA, under which now Ghana had the opportunity to export certain major commodities to America, tariff-free, customs, no customs barriers, and America also had the opportunity to do the same.
So a free trade.
Free trade, basically. He wasn't even a minister of trade or minister of foreign affairs or anything. He was an ambassador. And this is how the man's mind works. There was another story about his ambassadorial role that people sought to use against him. And I had to go to the US and I had to go to Washington, D.C. to find out the truth for myself. There was a story leading to one of our primaries that Alan had caused financial loss to the state as an ambassador because he had sold one property that Ghana had as embassy property and gone to invest in another, and there was a total loss. There was a lot of noise made about it. So after he left the US, I had a chance to travel to the US and I visited the then ambassador, Dr. Adusei Poku. So he took me to the ambassador's residence in Potomac district. And as we approached the residence, I said, I was in disguise, ambassador. Where are we heading to? So this is the ambassador's residence. I said, wow. And then we entered. This was a huge, plush, multi-million-dollar property that Alan had invested in for the state of Ghana.
Owned by the country.
Owned by Ghana. And when you go to Washington and they tell you about Potomac district, you should check the personalities who live in that enclave.
Is the East Legon?
Is higher than is bigger. East Legon doesn't have the Potomac River. doesn't have the forests.
No, I'm just saying that. I'm just saying is their East Legon.
It's incredible. So I said, so how could anybody have thought that this meant a financial loss? If today Ghana decide for whatever reason to sell that property to invest in another, I mean, you can imagine what the gentleman had done for Ghana.
Okay.
So then you come to Ghana and let's talk about PSI. Now, when President Kufuor recalled Alan from the US as ambassador to be trade minister, he took it up. And then he went to President Kufuor now to suggest that, Mr. President, I think we have to do things a bit out of the box. Can we find 3-4 different growth poles such that our growth will not just be business as usual, but we would invest in certain critical areas that will provide fresh impetus to our economic growth by way of export-oriented growth? So the president said, can you go ahead? And he presented cassava, oil palm, salt, and garments, 4 initiatives, which was then christened the President's Special Initiatives.
So now, it was his idea?
Out, exactly. And of course, fortunately for him, the President approved. Because if you're a minister and you send a proposal to the President,
it becomes
and the President said, oh yes, but shelve it. That's the end of it. You know, like in today's government, Alan brings up one district, one factory, and President Kufuor says, oh, no, I'm focusing on, he couldn't have gone ahead. So here, Alan comes up with these 4 initiatives. That was when the Ayinsu starch factory came up. People talk about collapse when Guinness has bought over this factory. And Guinness is taking starch from this factory in producing beer and starch from other similar factories, because people then took this initiative on their own. All that Alan does is to give you the idea, give you the support, try and push people into this area. And individuals have gone into it, and there is a huge export of starch as we speak now, for pharmaceutical purposes, for textile purposes, for other food production purposes. So I don't even know how anybody would suggest that any of those initiatives have collapsed. Oil palm. Until Alan took over trade industry, and he wasn't the Minister of Agric anyway, just the idea. Ghana hadn't done anything up to about 100,000 acres of oil palm before. Now as we speak, specifically because of that initiative then, Ghana has in excess of 100,000 or even more of cultivated oil palm. Some chiefs, especially in Ashanti and Eastern region and other areas, took up the initiative, and they're still running them. The thing is that once the NPP government went out of office in 2008, basically the support that government as such was giving to these initiatives was not forthcoming. And even then, salt, today, one of the people who is a big, at least 2 I can think of, big billionaires in Ghana today are into salt. Osei Kwame Despite, Magdan, and others.
And it was in the initiative
of
Alan
that
has
been this initiative that
okay.
people got this kind of impetus to move.
Okay.
And then textile exports. Garments. So I don't even see how anybody could suggest that these
So the PSI was a success, not a baggage.
And I would have wished that for the period intervening between 2008 and 2016, when the NPP came back, if it had been consistently supported, because Malaysia alone makes $20 billion from oil palm alone every year. So from that time until now, I'm sure we probably wouldn't have needed to go back to the IMF.
So that's the story of Alan Chemartin under Rawlings, under Kufuor. When we come back, Alan Chemartin under Akufo-Addo and Alan Chemartin as flag bearer of the NPP. What is he bringing to the table? Please stay with us. This is Face to Face. You're welcome back. This is Face to Face on City TV. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and the NPP have said to us that never again will we go to the IMF. They said to us they're going to move our economy from taxation to production. The government hasn't particularly succeeded in that. We are back at the IMF begging for support. And for the matter of taxation, well, I bought a bag of rice for 600 cedis. When I checked the invoice, I noticed that about 100 cedis of that was on taxes. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo's Minister for Trade as Alan Kyerematen until recently when he resigned. He wants to now be the flag bearer of the party. Nana Ohene Ntow, you believe that this is the man who should lead the NPP and for that matter the country for the next 4 or 8 years. How has he succeeded in the trade industry space under Akufo-Addo's government?
Thank you. First of all, let me talk about this much talked about digitization. You would know that
you are venturing
right
into a field I have not invited you to.
Yes, yeah, but I'm talking about Ministry of Trade.
Okay.
And Alan Kyerematen.
Okay.
That's what you asked.
Okay.
You notice that the processes for clearance of goods at the port have been very highly digitized. This was Alan Kyerematen's initiative.
At the port?
Yes.
The paperless port?
And the Ministry of Trade, yes.
Not Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia?
No.
How? We know that he's a digitalization man.
You see, the Ministry of Communications puts out a policy and then puts out the directions, and every sector would have to implement the aspects of the sector that deals with the program that deals with your sector. In the case of port digitalization and the paperless program, the record is there. So it was one of the first things that Alan has done to facilitate the processes of clearing of goods and so on and so forth. Now, when you come to taxes,
before I go taxes,
yes,
the credit for the paperless port,
yes,
to the best of my knowledge,
yes,
goes to the vice president.
Yes.
He's seen as a man.
It has been wrongly placed, if I should clarify that.
So the credit has been given wrongly.
You can check the records, check it with customs, check it with the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, check with the Ministry of Trade.
And we will see that who? It is Alan who signed off on these or what?
These are initiatives of the Ministry of Trade in collaboration with the customs and the port authorities.
How about the office of the vice president? Was there any role?
Well, the office of the vice president would have been given, I guess, some supervisory role. But even in then, here is a case you have a ministry for communication. So right now, what did the minister do? So I just wanted to give you, I don't want to veer off into
That's fine.
But I'm stating a fact which you can check.
Okay.
And it is one of the achievements of Alan.
Okay.
Now, when you come to taxes, the government system works this way. The Ministry of Finance is responsible for proposing taxation. The approval of taxes are done by Parliament, and then Ministry of Finance through the revenue system can enforce. So nobody is saying that any country can do without taxes, but people are now complaining over taxation, which I will concede is a reality, because you're telling me about the percentage of the price of a bag of rice.
Yes, plus a gallon of oil.
Yeah, you know, so those are real issues. And especially the references that you're making, we have said as a government, as a party, that we'll never go back to the IMF. And
you're a proud nation.
Yes, you know.
Your pride has fallen flat.
Yes, I think that it was a bit overreaching for the president and the finance minister and all of his deputies and the vice president to have said never, 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 will never go to the IMF.
Maybe they took advice from their Minister for Trade, who is in cabinet.
Let me tell you what
the issue of taxes,
yes,
the cabinet approves it before it goes to Parliament.
Let me tell you what the Minister of Trade said when the president, the vice president, the finance minister, and his deputies said we will never go to the IMF. When Alan Kyerematen was interviewed, he said, I cannot say that we will never go to the IMF because I am not God. These are his words.
I don't remember this interview.
I will show you the video.
Who and when?
I'll send you. The video is all over the place on social media, even today.
Okay.
He said, I am not God. We wish we never go to the IMF. But to sit here and say we will never, I think it's... And he said, I'm not God, so I cannot predict into the future. But What we need to do is to do things such that we will focus on empowering the private sector. And once the private sector begins to grow, and you are getting revenue from export, revenue from private sector business, then you may not need to go. But to say that we will never, I am not God.
So you don't.
So then let me tell you how.
Okay,
the story
so
went.
he didn't particularly think the IMF was a no-no then at the time.
No.
Do you remember which media house he spoke to?
I think either TV3 or Metro TV is video.
Okay.
We can. I think I even.
We
have
can,
it on-
okay, no problem.
I have it on my phone. So now you know what happened. When eventually the government had to go to the IMF, and the government put out a list of cabinet ministers who have to go out into the media and explain and defend the issue. Of all the ministers that were listed, it was only Alan Chamatin who had the capacity and the credibility to speak to these issues. Because everybody has said, well, never. So it was difficult. The president never said anything. The vice president never said anything. Kanofureta never said anything. None of his deputies were able to speak. But when Alan got up and said, well, we would have wished never to go to the IMF. But, first point is that before this government took over, the NDC was already running the IMF program. So 2016, Akufo-Addo's government took over in the middle of the IMF program initiated by the NDC. So we worked our way out of it. Then Alan said, when we got out, we should have focused more on the private sector, focused on one or two things in order that we wouldn't need to go back. Then he said, look, we are legitimate members of the IMF. It's a club. We are dues paying members. We wished we don't go there, but now we are pushed to the wall. And as dues paying members, if that is the only option left for now, and it's for only a brief period of reprieve, then we have no choice. But the IMF will never help any country to develop or to grow. So we should quickly think about how to run our policy, our economic development programs such that we may not need to go there. And there are things we will do or we need to do which would ensure you don't just say it with your mouth that I won't go there when you are not doing the things that will not send you there.
Is Alan
So
going
really,
to
in that sense, Alan is very, very credible.
Is he going to extricate himself from the problems of this government, or he's going to accept that he's part of the bus, and if the bus is going?
But I've just told you that he's part of the bus.
But if he had these views,
yes.
Did he push these views strongly and they were rejected?
Well, I am not in cabinet. I wasn't in cabinet, and the times that I sat in President Kufuor's cabinet, you were not even permitted to speak about the things that
even though there were leaked memos from cabinet at the same time.
But those are not, they are not legitimate.
It's not legitimate, I agree.
But
okay.
the point is also that you have the government's thinking and mentality and plan of action, but you also have the individual thinking and perspectives of individual ministers. And I think that to this extent, at the time that the president said we won't go to the IMF, the vice president said never. Minister of Finance, Kanofureta, said never. His deputy said never. It was the same time that Alan was also interviewed, and he said, well...
So Alan is the most credible in the list, you think?
Course.
Now, why does he want to be president of Ghana?
Because he believes that in the current situation, first of all, he has displayed such understanding of the current difficulties of this nation, the real problem. He's been able to diagnose it so well. Two, he has already put out a program, a vision, a framework of policy actions that, if taken and followed through, can really see Ghana out of
the GTP.
Exactly. So
that's what he believes is going to get Ghana out of the woods.
Yeah, but he's spoken to the whole nation, so everybody can interrogate what Alan said.
Okay.
You know, I mean, we are a nation, and we are in this situation. I don't think that anybody expects us to be stuck in the mud. We got to get out. But if you say we're going to get out, how? You got to tell us exactly how, and that is what Alan has begun to do. Of course, this is not a full-fledged policy document. This is not a full-fledged manifesto, but at least it gives you certain highlights that clearly shows you that the man is clear in his thinking and in his vision. And anybody who cares to read, and I have a copy of the document with me right here, anybody who really understands the situation of Ghana will tell you that the man knows what he's talking about.
If he failed in 2007, why would he succeed in 23?
But people failed earlier attempts and they succeed.
I'm talking about the party base. Why do you think that the NPP will not choose him? He has said, or you people around him, I don't know whether he said it or you people around him said, Ebruneso.
Yes.
There's a vice president in the mix, and people are saying that that makes it very difficult for Alan to automatically climb up there, because it's a vice president who you could describe as the most active vice president in recent times.
Active in terms of what?
Visible, active, driving a lot
We're
of...
talking about Ghana in a certain situation now, requiring a certain kind of leadership. I am sure that the people who speak for the vice president for his campaign will come and speak to his credentials. But I can tell you, I am not even talking about only the people who are interested in becoming flag bearer of NPP. I'm talking about the people who want to be president of Ghana, from John Mahama, who's already now elected as candidate, down to whoever. And I'm looking at the individuals and their track record. And I think I have a bit of capacity to be able to analyze their track record and their backgrounds. And I can tell you, given what I know about all of these personalities, as I speak here, I will tell you, Ghana's situation is not about NPP or NDC. No. It's about some individual who knows what it takes.
So it's a jockey, not the horse.
It is about an individual and the leader. Because you see, and don't ask me for details because I won't give it to you.
Okay.
We have seen NPP in government. We have seen NPP in government. And broadly speaking, a lot of people will tell you they see two different things. That's where I'll put it. We've seen...
Because you're pro-Kufuor.
Yeah. No.
So are you saying the Kufuor government,
I'm
NPP?
asking... No, listen to me carefully.
Okay, say that again.
Because I'm speaking as a general secretary of the whole party.
Yes.
And if you're a general secretary of the whole party, doesn't mean you would have to just go on with everything. You have to be a bit scientific and objective. And that's why I'm saying don't ask me for details because I won't give it to you.
Okay.
We've seen NDC in government. We've seen NDC in government. We've seen NDC in government. And I'm sure that if you take Jerry Rawlings, Atta Mills, and John Mahama, you would see some differences. Same party. So that is why I'm telling you, where Ghana is today, it is not about a party. I am happy we talk about party and party policies and party ideas, but an individual and the person for now who understands the problem of Ghana, who has shown by his track record from his time in the private sector. When Alan started working on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which has been realized and brought to Ghana now, NPP was not even in government. He was not even a government minister. And that was when he was able to do that, initiated, fortunately, at the time that the thing was coming to maturity. He happened to be Minister of Trade. Now, if this kind of person is in charge, there's a big difference between the power of a president, the prerogative and the discretion of a president, and that of a minister.
There's only so much to do.
Exactly. As ambassador, as minister, this is how much he's got us. And as president, I can tell you, Alan is the man who will get Ghana out of the woods.
We need to go, but I just have one last question. You are called, or there's this group called the Kufuor Group, or Kufuor Agenda. What's the role of former President Kufuor in the Alan campaign? Is he supporting Alan now?
No, President Kufuor is a statesman. He's an elder of the whole party. All of the people who want to become flag bearers have gone to Kufuor. And Kufuor will say, oh, I bless you.
But he has a favorite, doesn't he?
Well, that one will be a personal thing. So
do you want to share with us?
I'm not Kufuor.
Oh, but you are close with Kufuor.
I'm not Kufuor.
Nana Ohene Ntow, former secretary of NPP, lead senior advisor for Alan Kojo-Tramante's campaign. Thank you so much for joining us on Face to Face, and wish you all the best.
I thank you so much for this opportunity.
My name is Umar Rusanda. This has been Face to Face on City TV. Thank you for watching City TV. It's your world.
Hello and welcome to City Sports Roundup with me, Benjamin Nketia. Coming up, Ghana suffers injury blow as defender Gideon Mensah ruled out of AFCON qualifier against Madagascar. Also, Paris Saint-Germain forward Kylian Mbappe refutes claims he asked to leave the club in the summer. And La Liga president Javier Tebas wants power to fight racism following abuse of Vinicius Jr. Let's get to the details of our stories now. Now, the Black Stars of Ghana are gearing up for their penultimate game against Madagascar in the 2023 AFCON qualifiers on June 18. The team held their second training session at the Accra Sports Stadium with Arsenal's Thomas Partey, the latest player to arrive in camp. Chris Hughton will now work with a full house before departing to Antananarivo on Friday for the game. A victory for the Black Stars in Madagascar on June 18 will automatically qualify Ghana to the next AFCON Championship to be held in Ivory Coast. Meanwhile, Black Stars defender Gideon Mensah has been ruled out of the game due to a knee injury. Now, the 24-year-old did not train with the team on Monday and upon further evaluation has been withdrawn from the squad due to the severity of the injury. Meanwhile, Executive Council member of the Ghana Football Association, Dr. Randy Abbey, has backed Chris Hughton's tenure as head coach of the national team to be a success. Now, Ghana currently top Group E with 8 points and a win against the Malagasi's, who will take them through to the AFCON tournament in Cote d'Ivoire next year. Speaking to City Sports ahead of the qualifiers, Dr. Randy Abbey expressed confidence in the current technical team.
Even if a coach tells me he's not under pressure, I won't take it. I mean, it's part of their game. It's part of their job. It's part of what they signed up to. They must, on the basis of experience and all that, be able to come up with a certain level of calmness and